He's coming home. He's coming home, and it is not the man we want home.
And Prince William has made it 100% clear he doesn't want to have Harry around.
Yeah.
That Harry is a big problem.
I wouldn't believe Harry if he told me the sky was blue. He's doing this out of desperation. Desperation because nothing has worked in Hollywood. He's got no work. Literally no work. No work in America at all. It all flopped.
Why does he pander to the anger of the people? Does he not care to be the last king of England? Does he think that the people are stupid?
Prince Harry is said to want to return to the United Kingdom every few months. That is not being framed as a rumor here, and it is not just a tabloid guess. The Duke of Sussex is reported to have shared that view through a source to the Sunday Times, and the royal editor at the paper reportedly put it in print back in September, then it kept resurfacing over the following year. Keep those 3 words in mind every few months, because by the end of this video, you will understand just how many doors may actually be open to the man making that request. Here is what you are getting, and why it is worth staying with this. First, the full list. The source says, Prince Harry has always enjoyed seeing his family, and we are going to go through every family member who, according to public discussion and reported reactions, has already turned him down, because the list is longer than many people realized. Second, there is a line buried in that same article that seems to undercut his own security case, and it reportedly came from his side, yet not one broadcaster has really connected those 2 paragraphs out loud. Third, there is the question of where he is actually expected to sleep in September, because that part has already been addressed once, and the answer was not the one many people assumed. Then there are the 4 search questions people keep typing into the internet every week. Is Prince Harry moving back to the UK? Why has Prince William not been speaking to Prince Harry? Is Meghan Markle coming with him? And did Prince Harry lose his UK security, or did he give it up? The place to begin is with what was actually briefed, because the exact wording matters here.
Prince Harry now admitting his desire, his plot, his secret ploy, his plan. You can use whatever term you want to overturn the Sandringham summit and reverse Megxit, announcing to the Sunday Times and its royal editor, Roy Anika, that he'll be back every few months. Oh, and by the way, that is just the beginning. Do you think the king has said hell no? Unfortunately not. Here's the new reporting. The Duke of Sussex will return, quote, more and more to the UK over the next year after his successful family reunion with the King last month. Prince Harry, 41, is set to visit Britain every few months and will return in September for about a week. He will undertake a series of engagements with Wellchild, the charity supporting seriously ill children, of which he is a patron, and the Invictus Games, which will be held in Birmingham next summer.
Look at the mechanics of it, not just the emotion. A man who spent years telling the public that Britain felt too risky to return to is now said to be planning visits every 8 to 12 weeks, and the explanation behind that lines up with the first search question. So let's answer it plainly. Is Prince Harry moving back to Britain? No, not officially, and not as a working royal, at least based on what has been reported so far. No one has suggested he has been given that role again. What seems to be taking shape is something smaller and maybe a little more strategic. It is a pattern of one trip, one charity appearance, one photo opportunity, and then another visit a few months later, until a man who once left the country becomes someone who is simply seen around it more and more. That is where the conversation starts to get messy, because online people are not just reacting to the visit pattern itself, they are trying to read what it could mean behind the scenes. Some viewers see it as a practical arrangement, while others think it raises fresh questions about how long this kind of back and forth can really last. And that is why the search terms keep circling the same old arguments. Every new appearance gets treated like a clue, even when no one involved has confirmed the bigger picture people are guessing about. So the next question becomes less about the trip itself and more about the family dynamics around it, especially the silence, the distance, and the reactions that have been discussed so widely online. That is where the story gets a lot more interesting, because what has not been said may be doing just as much work as what has been shared publicly.
No, they're not the reasons. He wants to try and see his father. and his wider family more frequently. Interesting, he didn't care about that in the past, did he? And also feels he can more effectively support his UK-based charities and patronages, including the Halo Trust and Scotty's Little Soldiers, with more regular in-person engagements and meetings. That's it? That's all he's got going on?
And notice which organizations were named. Well Child, the Halo Trust, Scotty's Little Soldiers, the Invictus Games in Birmingham. Every single one of them is tied to Britain, and all of them go back to his life long before California, before Netflix, and before the memoir. Nothing from the American side made the list. No mention of the production company, no reference to the lifestyle brand, nothing that was built in the last 6 years. That is why people online are reading this as more of a return to older roots than an expansion into something new. The plan, at least as it has been discussed, is not to stretch outward. It is to reverse course.
A source close to Harry said, the template for his visits has been working well, so the frequency of trips will increase, especially in the run-up to Invictus, which he's determined to make the best games yet. He wants more of a foothold here, the source went on. More trips back, less courtroom drama. Interesting.
Then comes the line this whole video is named after, and it lands so quietly that you could almost miss it if you are not paying close attention.
And what about the marriage? We just going to accept that he doesn't now want to spend much time with Meghan Markle at all, and everyone's just going to pretend as if that's totally normal? Oh, and by the way, the source adds, and he always loves seeing his family. Well, not William, not Catherine, the Princess of Wales, not Zara, and Mike Tyndall, not Princess Anne, not Sophie, not Edward. So who's he talking about?
Say it again, slower. He supposedly always enjoys seeing his family. So let us do the one thing nobody else seems to have done and count who is actually included. Prince William is not expected to meet him. The Princess of Wales is not expected to meet him. Tyndall and Mike Tyndall are not on the list. Princess Anne is not on the list. The Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh are not on the list. That does not sound like a simple brotherly disagreement. It looks more like the working side of the British royal family. The people who show up, shake hands, and cut ribbons in the rain are not available. That leaves exactly one person, his father. And that is the entire structure of this plan in one sentence. Every other door in that building appears closed, and the man behind the remaining one is 77, dealing with health concerns, and still the only person said to be answering. So now comes the second search question, the one people ask the most. Why won't Prince William speak to Prince Harry? The easy answer is the book. The easy answer is the Oprah interview. But the fuller answer is a broader category, and this month it was said on the record by a director at a Washington Policy Institute who has followed this family for 2 decades. And once that question is out in the open, the whole conversation starts to shift. Online, people are no longer just debating whether a visit is being planned, they are asking what kind of access still exists and who, if anyone, is actually willing to make space for it. That is why the reaction has been so intense. Some viewers think the situation shows a carefully managed attempt at staying connected, while others see a sign that the distance is still very real. Either way, the silence around the missing names keeps doing a lot of the talking, and that is exactly what keeps this story moving across social media and commentary circles. What makes it even more striking is how little has to be said for people to start filling in the blanks. Once a family pattern becomes public discussion, every detail gets picked over, every absence gets noticed, and every small update starts carrying more weight than it probably should. And that is where the next part of this story begins to matter, because the public reaction is now pushing the narrative just as much as the reported plans themselves.
Prince William, very, very significantly, has refused to engage in any meetings with his brother, and William will be the next king. And so William's role in all this is incredibly important. And as far as William is concerned, Harry is persona non grata.
Persona non grata. Not just estranged, not merely cooling off, and not simply needing more time. Persona non grata is a formal term, and it means someone who is not welcome or not received. It is the kind of phrase a country might use when expelling a diplomat, and here it was applied to the king's second son by a man who was describing the position of the king's first.
Everything that Meghan and Harry do, it's some kind of PR stunt, really. They don't care about the royal family. They care about themselves.
It's an observation. I did love the way you are discussing Prince William, just kind of like the no nonsense, to him, he instinctually knows, he recognizes that this is a problem, and let's cut it off. Let's just focus on the future.
And that position does not sound emotional, which is exactly why it is unlikely to change. Anger has a way of cooling off. It can be softened by time or by a carefully managed public image, but this does not read like anger. It reads like a decision that, according to the way it is being discussed, has been in place for years, checked again and again, and seemingly reinforced each time it has come up. This is the part that really matters, because it is the centerpiece of the discussion, and it is the part most people covering this story have not said out loud on camera. Buried in the same article, during the same week, the Sunday Times says Prince Harry is still in dispute with the Home Office over his perceived risk level and the level of security he says he needs. That fight is still going on after he lost a long-running legal challenge against the government last year, where he had been seeking to have automatic police protection restored.
The article goes on, Harry is still battling with the Home Office to have his threat level and security requirements reviewed after losing a long-running legal battle with the government last year to have his automatic police protection reinstated in the UK.
Then, just a few lines later in that same piece, another detail from his own side comes into view, and it changes the tone all over again. And that is exactly why people online keep zooming in on the wording. If the reported request is for more visits, while another part of the discussion is still centered on disputed security concerns, then every sentence starts to matter a lot more than it would in a regular family story. Social media users have been treating that contrast as the real headline, not because anything has been confirmed beyond doubt, but because the two ideas sit awkwardly beside each other. So the conversation is no longer just about who is willing to see him. It is also about what kind of access, protection, and public image are being discussed at the same time, and whether those pieces can really be separated. That is why the reaction keeps growing, because people are not only reading the article, they are reading between the lines, and trying to figure out what those lines might suggest about the wider family situation.
It is understood the Sussexes' visit last month went off without any hitches. Okay.
Read that twice, because those two paragraphs cannot both carry the same weight. In one, the Duke of Sussex is said to be asking the British state to reassess the perceived level of risk around him. In the other, he is described as having moved around Britain for a week without any incident. That is why online commentators keep focusing on the wording. He was reportedly briefing the newspaper in a way that suggests he may not need the very protection he is said to be seeking through the dispute.
No, Harry, you can just keep doing what you did. You can come on. Actually, next time, please don't announce it. Don't tell anyone. Just come in, do your thing, leave. Seriously.
That is not some small technical detail. It is the whole argument. A threat assessment is not about feelings. It is about paperwork, evidence, and what actually happens when the man arrives. And according to people on his side, what happened was nothing at all. No incident, no disruption, no sign that anything went wrong. He spent a week in the country he had described as too risky to move around freely in, and online commentators have pointed out that the trip appeared to go ahead without any obvious trouble.
What happened to the alleged risk? That was so great to Harry and his family. Did it ever exist at all? No, but it was sure convenient for Harry and Meghan at the time.
And sit with what that admission may have cost him, because it did not have to be there. Nobody forced it into the article. It was apparently volunteered by the same operation that put the return story into the same briefing on the same day. To make the trips sound successful, they also seemed to concede that the trips were safe, and once that point was raised, the logic behind the lawsuit started to weaken. You cannot brief both versions at once. Either the danger is real and the visits are reckless, or the visits are fine and the danger was always being used as part of a broader negotiation. That is why people keep circling back to the wording, because the moment one side of the story shifts, the other side suddenly looks a lot less convincing. And that is why the reaction has kept building, because people are not just debating one visit or one briefing, they are questioning the whole way the story is being packaged. If the same source is being used to frame the trips as smooth, while the wider dispute is still being presented as serious, then viewers naturally start asking which part is meant to carry the most weight. That kind of mixed messaging is exactly what gets picked apart online. What makes it stick is the contrast. On one side, there is the suggestion that he wants regular contact with the family. On the other, there is the separate discussion around whether the concerns tied to his security claims are being overstated, minimized, or simply reframed by people around him. No official version has settled that tension, so social media users keep filling in the gaps with their own interpretations. And once that happens, every small detail turns into a bigger talking point. A single line can shift the tone of the whole piece, and that is why commentators are treating the wording like a clue rather than filler. It is not about proving anything outright. It is about how the story lands when both sides are placed next to each other. That is where the real pressure seems to be building.
If that is truly what he wants, then maybe he should stop suing anyone who dares to disagree with him or hold him and his wife accountable. Maybe he should visit his family without briefing the press on his every move, only to turn around and complain that his privacy has been violated.
That leaves the bigger question sitting right under the whole story. Why would a private citizen be laying out private family visits through a national newspaper in the first place? Because, at this point, the trips themselves almost feel secondary. The real thing being discussed is the coverage around them, and that is what keeps drawing attention.
Seriously, there is no need for these briefings. You are a private citizen. If you want to see your friends and family, not many of them want to see you, but if you want to see them, then fine, just come in, come out, zip it. Just like Taylor Swift does, just like Mark Zuckerberg does, just like Elon Musk does, zip.
It almost begs the question, why is he putting this information into the press? It doesn't make any sense.
And that is the third gap in this reporting. If someone truly wants to see their father, they usually just get on a plane. They do not brief a royal editor about plans to visit in 8 weeks' time. That is not really how family life works. That is how launches work, how campaigns work, how something gets packaged for attention. These trips are being presented ahead of time to an audience in almost the same way a series gets pitched to a network. And the audience is not really the British public. It is whoever is still deciding whether the Sussex name is worth money.
This article says he wants less courtroom drama and he always loves seeing his family. The failed litigation was all his, and P-Brain helped portray his own family as trapped racists. He's an utter creep.
Now for the third question, and this one has a documented answer that seems to have been quietly reframed. Where does Prince Harry actually stay when he returns in September? That detail matters more than it may sound, because it is one of those small points that can change how the whole story is read. That is where the story starts to tighten, because the location is not just a small travel detail, it is part of the larger picture people have been picking apart online. When one piece of the report points one way and another seems to suggest something different, the whole narrative becomes easier to question. And that is exactly what some viewers have been saying here. Commentators have been focusing on the gap between what is being said publicly and what viewers think is being left unsaid. If the trip is being presented as simple family business, then why does it keep arriving wrapped in so much media framing? If the goal is privacy, why does the timing keep ending up in the public conversation? Those are the kinds of questions that keep driving reactions. So the next detail matters because it can either support the idea of a straightforward visit or deepen the suspicion that the story is being managed carefully. And once people start reading it that way, even the smallest fact stops feeling minor and starts feeling loaded.
The King is expected to be at Balmoral in Scotland on his summer break next month when Harry returns, and it is not known whether they plan to meet again. Sources close to Harry said that no decision has yet been made on whether he will stay at Buckingham Palace during his visit. So again, that little dangling carrot of Harry at Buckingham Palace, something that destroys our view of the monarchy, sadly still there, at least not confirmation of it.
Pay attention to that one word, because the accommodation question had already been settled once before, and the sequence of events is already on the record.
When Harry had been so disrespectful in challenging the palace, when they said, when he said, "I'm staying," and they said, "No, he's not staying." And then he did a big performative. They took their offer back when actually he denied. He told them he didn't want to stay there, and hours later went back. And then they said it was too late. And this all happened after the deadline.
A room was said to have been offered, although the Duke of Sussex publicly disputed that it had actually been put on the table. A few hours later, his side reportedly circled back and accepted, but the palace response was that it was already too late because the deadline had passed. So, according to the way this has played out online, a man arrived in Britain aiming to mend a relationship and ended up in a public dispute with the very place he wanted to stay before the plane had even landed. That is the room he now seems to be hoping is still waiting, and no one has confirmed that it is.
They'd given him. So he publicly goes to war with Buckingham Palace before he arrives there, and then insults the king's court after that Daily Mail loss. A lot of us felt like he hadn't earned, a place in front of King Charles.
Which leads to the part of the story that really shifts how everything else is being read, because it puts the timing into focus. So why now? Why this month? And why is a plan stretching over the next 12 months being brought up right in the middle of August? That is where people are telling others to look at the other ledger. That is why the reaction around this story has been so intense, because people are not just reading the headline, they are reading the timing, the wording, and the gaps between the lines. Once that starts happening, every small detail begins to feel like part of a bigger message. And that is exactly what online commentators have been circling back to, the sense that one version of events is being presented publicly, while another set of questions is left hanging in the background. It is not that anyone has confirmed a hidden meaning, it is that the sequence has given viewers enough room to wonder whether the situation is being handled with a very careful hand. So the conversation keeps moving in that direction, less about a simple visit and more about what the visit seems to signal. When people start connecting those dots, even basic logistics can take on a different weight, and that is where the pressure around this story begins to build.
If it wasn't for the desperate commercial failure. Because, of course, the commercial failures, the lack of being able to make money, continues to heap the pressure on the marriage. And that is now what is making this all feel more urgent. Look, it is disastrous. Friday, August the 7th, $275. Saturday, August the 8th, $253. Sunday, August the 9th, $266. Monday, August the 10th, $91. Tuesday, August the 11th, $110. Wednesday, August 12th, $97. Thursday, August the 13th, $58. So at that point, the movie is completely commercially unsustainable.
$58. That was the full day's takings across every screen still carrying it, and by the final day it was only showing in enough places to be counted at all. This was not being framed as a quiet opening or a project waiting for word of mouth to build. Instead, online discussion has pointed to a steep drop measured in double digits, and the scale of the ambition behind it had never seemed modest. It was supposed to show real pulling power, the one thing that the entire American rollout was built to prove.
Really is box office poison. She really is. You would think that she would be able to draw people in. Meghan has a proven brand, and that is that people repel against anything that she is attached to. And anything that you do with her is going to be a failure.
Now line the two stories up on the same calendar, because that is how a lot of viewers are reading it. The commercial side appears to stall, and within days, talk surfaces about spending the next year in Britain. Not California, Britain. The country where the family is, the country tied to the titles, the country where the surname still carries weight without needing much explanation. The asset that has kept appreciating is not the jam, and it is not the film. It is the word royal, and according to online discussion, that word seems to regain value in only one postcode. Which brings us to the fourth question, the one people keep searching for, because it is the one most openly sidestepped in coverage of the return. Is Meghan Markle coming? No.
Decision has been made on whether the Duchess of Sussex or their children, Archie and Lily, will travel from California to join Harry during the visit.
No final decision has been made, and that phrase has been circulating for weeks now. After 6 years of a marriage that has often been presented like a two-person operation, a brand where one name has rarely appeared without the other, the plan for the next 12 months is being discussed with just one name attached to it. He is looking east. Every few months for about a week at a time in a country where reporting has placed him and his wife at polling levels far below what many expected for someone who was once fully removed from his working royal role. That is exactly why the reaction has gone beyond simple gossip. Because once people think a story is being shaped in layers, every line starts to matter a little more. What looks like a straightforward update can suddenly feel loaded with side meaning, especially when the public has already been split into different camps over how this should be handled. And that is where the tone shifts again, because the issue is no longer just about travel plans or family access. It becomes about what this kind of move says publicly, who it benefits, and why the wording keeps leaving room for interpretation. Online, that has only made people read the situation more closely, not less. So the pressure around the story keeps building in a very specific way, through silence, through selective details, and through the fact that no one seems eager to spell everything out at once. That gap between what is said and what is implied is what keeps this whole discussion moving forward.
Your point, the polling is out there that shows that they poll as low as Andrew Mountbatten Windsor at this point.
She is not part of the plan, and this is where a second reading of the whole situation comes in. It should be treated carefully for what it is, one commentator's interpretation, not a confirmed fact. The argument being made is that the briefing was never really aimed at the British public at all.
But if you look at it from the perspective that Meghan and Harry may be in conflict with his decision to go back frequently, or to the fact that he's even putting this out into the press, it could be a way to send a message to his wife that that is what we're getting ready to do. We're getting ready to go back more often because we're going to move back eventually.
This is all about managing the expectations, though, too, of the public, isn't it? This is what's coming. This is why it's coming.
That remains speculation, and it should be treated as speculation. But it is easy to see why some viewers think it makes sense. There does not seem to be any practical reason to announce it early. No charity appears to gain anything from a heads-up about a September visit. It does not create a security benefit either, and in fact, it could raise obvious security concerns, the same kind of concern the man involved has raised in his own case. So who was that message really for? That brings us back to the fourth search question, and this time the answer needs to be stated plainly, because the internet tends to get it wrong in both directions. Did Prince Harry lose his UK security? Not exactly. Protection for the royal family in Britain is not something you simply own, and it is not treated as an automatic inheritance. It is tied to the role and assessed case by case. Once the Duke of Sussex stepped away from that role, the automatic entitlement ended with it. He challenged that decision through the Home Office and then took it to court. The court did not side with him, and that is the part that links the security issue back to the family issue, because online discussion keeps treating them as separate when they were always connected. Every few months, remember that phrase, because the request underneath that phrase is not really about seeing his father, and it is not really about well child, and it is not really about Birmingham next summer. What people online are reading into it is something much bigger, the same arrangement the late Queen is said to have shut down in a room at Sandringham in 2020, when she was quoted as saying, "You cannot have 1 foot in and 1 foot out. Build the name in California. Come back when it fits the schedule. Step away again before any real obligation is attached." And that is why the reaction is not fading, because people online are not just hearing a family update, they are reading a bigger message into it. Once a story starts to sound like it has layers, every small detail gets pulled apart, and every silence starts to matter. That is also why the discussion keeps circling back to timing and intent. Some viewers think the wording leaves too much room for interpretation, while others say it only becomes messy because the public keeps trying to connect separate points that were never meant to be read together. Either way, the commentary has turned the whole thing into more than a simple travel note. What makes it even more sensitive is that the security angle and the family angle keep getting discussed side by side, even though they are not the same issue. Online, people keep asking whether the request is really about access, optics, or something broader underneath it, and that uncertainty is exactly what keeps the conversation alive.
Why I'm just so dead set against Harry being half in or half out, or, having any sort of place in the royal fold again. And I say, well, Queen Elizabeth said no half in, half out. I think that would be wildly disrespectful to allow that to take place.
She said no, and the setup being discussed now, every few months, selected charities, no formal role, no public announcement, sounds like that same arrangement coming back in pieces instead of through a direct request. If nobody flags it, nobody has to openly approve it. But one man noticed it 6 years ago, and according to the way this story is being discussed, he has not shifted since.
Only themselves to blame, and they always portray themselves endlessly as the victims. They're not the victims, they're the aggressors actually against the royal family here, which is why I think that they could never live in the UK, because they are such unpopular figures, and they would be deeply unpopular if they ever moved back to the United Kingdom.
That is the difference between the two brothers, and it is not really about personality. It comes down to how one of them, according to online discussions, seemed to view the family almost like a platform to build on, while the other appeared to see it as an inheritance that should be passed down intact and left undamaged.
This is a hard lesson for King Charles, especially when you have Prince William, where everybody wanted Prince William to ascend the throne, because nobody's holding this king on high regard. His public affection for Prince Harry, bringing him here, playing all these dirty games with Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. Why? Why?
So this is where the story seems to land. Prince Harry is said to be returning to Britain every few months, according to reporting from the Sunday Times and sources connected to that coverage, with the schedule first surfacing back in September. In that version of events, his father would still be the one waiting on the other side, the last door that appears to remain open. Prince William, by contrast, is not expected to meet him, and public commentary has long suggested that he wants distance. The Princess of Wales is also not part of that picture, and neither are Princess Anne, Zara, and Mike Tyndall, or the Edinburghs. There has also been uncertainty around a room at Buckingham Palace, since that offer was disputed, then said to have been accepted too late, and never clearly raised questions about again. At the same time, Harry is still said to be raising concerns with the Home Office about his safety in the US. Key, even though his team previously raised questions about how he spent a week moving through the country without any reported incident. As for whether his wife will travel with him, no decision has been made public. Every few months, that is the plan. Count the people on the other end of it. And now I want to hear from you, specifically because I read every one of these and pinned the sharpest. Prince Harry arrives in September. Does Prince William agree to see him within the next 12 months, or does that door stay shut for good? That is why this story keeps pulling in more attention than a simple family update should. The public is not just reacting to who may or may not meet, they are reading the situation as a sign of how the wider relationship still stands behind the scenes. Once that happens, every detail starts to feel loaded, and every unanswered question gets treated like it means something more. Online, the discussion keeps splitting in two. Some viewers think the whole thing is being shaped too carefully to avoid saying anything direct, while others believe people are reading extra meaning into a story that was already complicated enough. Either way, the uncertainty is doing most of the work here, because when the facts are not fully clear, speculation fills the space fast. And that is exactly what has kept this from fading. The family side, the security side, and the public reaction all keep overlapping, even though nobody is saying they are the same issue. That overlap is what makes the conversation feel tense, because the more people try to separate the pieces, the more they seem to blur back together again. Type meets if you think William softens within a year. Type never if you think the answer looks exactly the same 12 months from now. Leave one line on why, because the split on this story should be interesting to read. And if you want the full breakdown of what actually happened inside that Highgrove meeting, the one with no cameras and no photo released, that video is on the screen now. Like, subscribe, share, and comment. See you on the next one.